Okay, let's keep right on going here to some of our organizational structures. Okay, that's not to be confused with the HR structures, right? So HR structures are the way that HR structures itself to support the organization. We are now talking about organizational departmentalization, right? Or organizational structure, where the actual organization is set up, right? So the first one is functional departmentalization. A functional organizational structure is a division of the organization by department. And these departments are all under one roof, and they are split according to the functions that they belong to, right? You can see this on the screen here. This is split by production. That's one function. Finance is a function. Marketing, human resource, right? But they are all under this one company. All right. Next is product departmentalization. So this is a split of the organization according to the product or according to the service that they provide. In this structure, there is one parent company. And from that parent company, you have separate product divisions. And all of the divisions have the same functions within them that is necessary to operate. So each product division has its own HR. They have their own IT. They have their own finance, right? They essentially kind of run like they're kind of like their own little small business, right? So you can see here in this product departmentalization, we have a two-wheeler department, there is a three-wheeler department, there's a four-wheeler department, there's a heavy motors department. Okay, next is geographic departmentalization, and this is a split of the organization depending on location, right? So again, each division has its own functions, but all of the products are being made in the North Zone. So you have the four-wheelers, the two-wheelers, the five-wheelers, the heavy, all of the stuff is being made in the North Zone, right? I think we need to say more about that. A matrix structure creates a dual reporting line, right? And that happens when an employee reports to, for example, maybe a product line, but also a corporate leader, right? So this person, like if a person was working here, they would report to this business unit. Maybe this is heavy motors, right? They would report to heavy motors, this product line, but also they report to the VP of manufacturing, right, in the corporate office. So there is that dual reporting line. The racing matrix responds to the confusion that a matrix structure can create. So this racing matrix defines roles, and it helps to define, who is the final decision maker when we are working in this kind of confusion. RACI, the acronym it stands for responsible. That's the R. The responsible person is the person who actually is doing the work, who is doing, the performing the task. And then the accountable person is the person who is ultimately going to be held responsible if things go wrong. The accountable person also is the person who can stop things from going wrong, because like if they are going to be held responsible, they have to have the authority to say, no, we're not going to do it like that, right? So this is the kind of the veto person. And then there is the consultant person, right? This is the person who may know more about what you're doing. So these are like our subject matter experts or, stakeholders who may have additional information. And then there is the informed person. This is the person who is going to be affected by the decisions that we are making in this, whatever this instance is that we're working on. All right, so that brings us to workforce management. We're winding down, guys. We're in the final stretch. All right. Workforce management is making sure that the organization always has the right talent doing the right job. And, we are paying them the right amount and it's at the right time. It's making sure we're analyzing our workforce to ensure that it is available, for our needs, and then making whatever adjustments necessary to ensure that the organization has what it needs for the future. That's basically it simplified. Workforce planning is the component of workforce management that ensures that the workforce is sufficient. We are looking at sufficiency in size. We're looking at sufficiency in skill, efficiency in knowledge, sufficiency in availability, right? All of those things. Workforce analysis is the first step in workforce planning, because workforce analysis is the examination into the workforce to determine what we have. What is the current capacity of the workforce, right? And also, what are we going to need for the future? So the workforce profile is a piece of that analysis. The profile is what currently exists in terms of competencies, in terms of knowledge, skill, right? Even the demographics that exist. It also has information like projected retirements. It has, it could pay levels are in there, right? Because all of that helps the organization to better predict the future. Workforce planning has 6 steps, and I'm going to be breaking those down. The steps of workforce planning: first, we are determining the strategic focus, then the supply analysis, the demand analysis, the gap analysis, the solution analysis, and the final stage is evaluation. All right, so let's look at the first one, the strategy. This is the first step in analysis. We're trying to identify the strategy. We have to understand the strategy because it is what helps us to determine whether we are sufficient in what we have. Do we have the resources that are available to meet the organization's strategic goal? So this is the step where we do like that environmental scanning. So we figure out, like, what are our weaknesses? What are our strengths? What threats, what opportunities can we take advantage of, right? What are the things that might influence how the organization operates? Like, are there political circumstances that might impact us? Are there environmental circumstances that might impact us, right? So that's what we're doing in step 1 in our strategy. Next is the supply analysis, right? So your supply analysis answers what is the current state of affairs. So what is already existing? This is the assessment of what the organization has in terms of skill, what it has in terms of number, competency, right? All of the things that are necessary, and also how easily accessible it is to us. So the supply forecast takes into consideration the amount of people that are going to be added to the employee. It takes into consideration people transferring from other branches, people leaving the organization, resignations, terminations, retirees, all those kinds of things, right? That's what we're looking for in step 1. I think I haven't seen any questions. All right. The next step is the demand analysis. So this is where the organization's future needs are determined, right? So we're analyzing the future needs in this demand analysis versus the current state. And that is going to help to reveal any gaps that we might have. Also, this is where we might do a what if analysis, right? So we try to introduce new things to say, what if we did this, right? How would it, determine, how would it impact, right? Next in the workforce analysis is the determination of the staffing gap. Once the supply has been determined and the demand has been forecasted, what's missing is the gap. So it is the difference between what the organization has versus what the organization needs, right? That represents what that organization's gap is. Once we determine what the gap is, the next step is to determine how we will respond to that gap. So what is the solution to overcome that gap, right? That is the that's what we do after we finally know what our gap is, right? Because then we know what we have, we know what we need. If we don't have a solution, then we can't accomplish our goals. So that solution analysis gives the organization direction. It guides us to either building, buying, borrowing, or bridging the talent that we need to fill those gaps. All right, so building is an investment in the talent that we have in-house. So that means developing the talent through training or through some coaching or whatever learning activities we can find. When the organization cannot build what they need from what we already have, then we might have to buy new talent. And buying talent means getting, that's just basic talent attraction, getting the people that we need. Borrowing is another option. That could be through contract employees, or it could be through third-party agency, right? It could be through contract workers. Then finally is bridging the employees. That is preparing employees to move up and take on other roles within the organization. Oops. I want to go back while I have this on here. And then finally is the evaluation of impact, right? That is the determination of whether we have been able to overcome the gaps. Right? We've talked about the solution analysis, right? Our solutions to our problems are either to buy, to borrow, or to bridge. It is important for you to know the differences between these. All right. So let's look at some one-liners here that are going to help us to see the differences here and help me to see if I need to go back and talk about this anymore. Okay, so let's look at the first one here. A manufacturing plant holds a job fair after a surge in production. What solution is being employed? Okay, perfect. Everybody's choosing buy, and buy is the correct answer. Awesome job. Awesome job, right? So we're holding a job fair, that's just basic talent attraction. That's what we do to get people. We have job fairs, right? Come to our job fair. We get your resume. You look great. We give you a job. All right, next. A management training program is implemented for hourly employees. Okay. I don't think I saw anybody choose the correct answer for this one. Oh, yes, I saw a couple people. Okay, I just need to scroll down. All right, so very good. Bridge is the correct answer. Awesome job. All right, let's go to the next one. After a team conference, Employee help desk technicians cut ticket resolution times by 6 minutes. All right, everybody chose build for this one. Build is the correct answer. Let's go to our last one. An accounting firm partners with a staffing agency to fulfill tax season obligations. Y'all are on the roll. Awesome, awesome job. Okay. We don't need to spend not one more second on it. Let's keep it moving. All right, we're moving on to employee relations. Guys, we are on the home stretch now. Okay, employee relations is the organization's effort to maintain a positive relationship with its employees. Because we know the value of engagement, and we know employees who value the relationship with their employer are much more productive. They are a lot easier to manage, right? In order to maintain this relationship, we need to be the liaison between the employees and the organization's leaders. We have to ensure that grievances reach the decision makers, because if we don't, those grievances can lead to labor unrest. And labor unrest leads to labor unions, and we do not want labor unions, right? So we want to be the representatives for our employees, not labor unions. Labor unions to me mean that the employees did not feel safe with their employers. I mean, if it's a labor union that's just forming, or it means that the employer has not done right by the employees, right? And so they feel like they need someone else there to protect them. The labor unions are the elected bargaining units that the employees choose to represent them when they feel like the organization does not have their best interest at heart, right? When they feel like they're unheard. So we want to try to avoid that. Employee relations has 5 main components. You have alignment with the organization strategy. You have to comply with the laws. You have to measure performance. You have to define the goals, and you have to establish the culture. If you do that, you will have a good employee relationship. The culture is essentially the way things are done at a company, right? So it is based on the employees of the organization and their experience in the organization. It is based on the habits that they've picked up. It's based on their way of thinking, right? The culture is made up of the values, the behaviors, and the missions. The company's values tell us what the company stands for. The behaviors tell us how things are done, right? You can have the most inspiring core valuables that you can think to write. You can hire, like Shakespeare to write them for you. But if employees are practicing the opposite, that is what gets embedded in the culture, right? So new employees learn from behaviors. They do not learn for what you write on your, bulletin, right? They learn from what they see other people doing. The mission tells us what the organization is doing on a day-to-day basis, what they're doing to reach the vision. And all of these things combine to make up the culture of the organization. The organization's policies should underscore the culture. So the policies tell the employees which behaviors which practices support the culture, and then which are in violation of the culture. So the policies make sure that everything runs smoothly on a day-to-day basis. They are the overall expectation of the organization. These are the things that set the direction. This is what guides the employees. This is what hopefully influences their decision making, right? So the policies guide the day-to-day action and the strategies, but they're not cemented, right? Your policies have to be revised. They have to be revisited, because as your organization evolves, and hopefully your organization is evolving, right? If your organization is not evolving, that means it's not responding to strategic drift. So that means it will pretty soon become irrelevant, right? So as your organization evolves, then your policies have to evolve to support that. I mean, 60 years ago, did we need to have an internet policy? No, we did not. But if your company still does not need an internet policy, it must mean that they are not using the internet. And in that case, your company is on the way to becoming irrelevant, right? So as new technologies development and organizations, do more things, then the policies have to evolve with them. As we've kind of already talked about labor unions, but a labor union, again, is just, it is an organization formed by the employees, and it represents the collective interests of the workers who form the bargaining unit, and they bargain with the employer. So most of the time they're bargaining over like wages, a lot of times working conditions, work hours. Sometimes it can even be like, the kinds of benefits that they offer. All right, now let's talk about the discipline. There's one more thing I want to say about this one though. Let's talk about one of the industrial actions that a collective bargaining unit does when it protests an employer's policy or the employer's actions, right? A strike is a reduction or a complete stoppage of work when the employees or the bargaining unit is in protest. And there are all kinds of different industrial actions, but we just need to agree that if your employees feel the need for a labor union, right? That is strike one. Once that bargain, you already have someone who is, the employees feel like need to represent them. If even after they get the labor union, they also have to engage in industrial actions, that's strike two, right? And that is pretty bad, right? If they still have to go on strike, if the first of all, I guess that would be strike three, because if the threat of the labor union isn't enough, and they actually have to form a labor union, and then that union goes on strike, then I don't know what you're doing as an employer, right? And so you need to reevaluate and do something different. All right, so let's move on. Let me get off my high horse. So discipline. Why is it important to discipline? So the organization's policies is what sets the standards of the organizations. Now, when an employee decides that they are not going to abide by those standards, then we have to discipline them. It is a way to correct the behaviors of the employees and to reset expectations. It's important for us to remember this, right? Because a lot of times we discipline people out of disappointment, out of anger, out of frustration, right? And we just think of it as another punishment because, listen, I told you over and over again, I'm frustrated with it. But sometimes discipline calls for punishment, but the intention of the punishment is to correct the behavior. It is not because you are frustrated or because you're angry or anything like that. Discipline signals to the employees that the organization is committed to fairness and they are doing something that is undermining that, right? So that is the purpose of it. Most employers use a progressive discipline policy. So that means that the employees move through tiers of raised disciplinary action for every new discipline occurrence, right? So here is an example. This is what Sherm defines as the progressive discipline steps. So the first one is a verbal warning. And a verbal warning just helps to shine a light on the problem, right? So when there is like a team conflict, maybe this is a way to facilitate communication and define those different points of view so that it doesn't turn into, an all-out problem. After that, the first warning, usually this is written. Sometimes it can be verbal, usually written, but managers should confidentially reset the organization's standards and then outline how the employee is violating those standards. If the employee doesn't correct the behavior, then there comes a second warning. Obviously, you'll have increasing consequences with this. And then there is the final warning, which might be accompanied by like time off. It could be a suspension, right? The final warning should state what the past disciplinary measures have been, right, in the progression, as well as the timeline for improvement. The termination is the final step, right? So the employee is demoted or they are discharged, which is terrible. Constructive discipline is a progressive form of discipline where the severity of the punishment increases as the behavior continues, right? There are two approaches to that disciplinary action. You have positive punishment, and positive punishment is adding something that the employee does not want following an infraction. And then there is negative punishment, right? So negative punishment is withdrawing something that the employee does want, right? Taking away something that they want following some kind of behavior that we don't want to have, right? So positive punishment, adding something. Negative punishment is taking something away. We do have some one-liners for these because the difference it's in these have traditionally been confusing. But you guys have been getting everything, so this will probably be easy for you. All right, so let's look at number one. Campus police give an employee a ticket for breaking the speed limit. Is this positive or negative punishment? It's going fast. Okay, this one is positive punishment. Very good. All right, let's go to the next one. An employee is demoted after several tardies. All right, this one is negative, right? So we're taking something away. Next, an intern is reassigned after a blow up with a coworker. All right, very good, very good. This is negative. And the last one, a manager counsels an employee after a blow up with an intern. All right, very good. This is positive. All right, very good. We are on a roll. Let's keep it going then. Let's keep the roll going. All right, so that brings us to conflict management, which we talked a little bit about, but it is a part of employee relations, so we want to also talk about it here. Again, conflict is any kind of discord that results because of differences in opinions, or maybe not even opinions. Maybe it's just a difference in how we approach work, or just differences in our personalities, or we just don't get along, right? So that conflict has to be managed because we want to make sure that it doesn't threaten the strategic goals. Conflict is often made known to HR or to the organization's leaders by way of employee complaints. Any act of payback taken by an employer or one of the employer's agents after an employee files a complaint or some kind of conflict happens is known as retaliation, right? Retaliation can be something simple. It can be just hostility. It can be exclusion of the employer or of the employee, or it could be something serious. It could be like firing somebody or demoting somebody, right? Doesn't matter how it is presented. Either way, it is illegal, and we have to avoid that. We have to have policies in place to deter that from happening. All right, so that brings us to technology management. Okay, we are wrapping things up in organization. Technology management is managing the use of technology for the human advantage. The role of technology is to help us to be more efficient. It is to help us to simplify our processes, to help us to store data, to recall data, and then we can use that data for forecasting. It is important in our strategic direction. It's important in, how we are, whether or not we're able to meet our objectives, right? Because if we can get people and technology working together to do what people are expecting, then it can be an extension of the human capacity, right? And if we can kind of integrate it into our processes to become an extension of us, then that's when we're using it most efficiently, right? So it can be working while we're at home sleeping or when we have the day off or, whenever. So that's how we want to use technology. When you're leveraging technology to increase the human capacity, or you're trying to extend the human capability, there are 4 components that come together to make that possible. Those are managing the large quantity of data, integrating technology so that it works in the way that we want it to work, and then also using technology to streamline our products or streamline our systems or processes, right? And then finally, when we have come to rely so heavily on technology, we have embedded it into like the inner workings of our organization, we are vulnerable, right? So we have to manage the use of technology. We have to develop policies to safeguard employee information and to safeguard operational information and limit that from the public's view, right? So we have to make sure that we have policies to do all 4 of these things. Big data analytics is a way of analyzing multifaceted data and data mining or extracting from the analysis patterns or correlations that hopefully will give us some insight, right? So using big data, we can be in a state of continuous learning about our organizations. In order to understand big data, we break it down into what is called the 5 V's of big data. Volume, that describes the amount of data that an organization generates. Velocity is the rate in which the data is generated. Variety is the different kinds of data. And then veracity is the accuracy of the generated data, right? And value, that is the usefulness of that data. HR professionals also have the responsibility of choosing an information system that is going to support the organization's strategy, right? Usually HRIS system. So that means that when we're working with IT to choose an information system for HR, we should be looking for a system that will support the organization as a whole, right? Not just what HR wants, but what is going to support everybody, right? What is going to make HR more efficient for the whole organization, not that thing that we've been wanting to try it out forever, right? Does it work for this organization, the one that we are a part of, right? So as well as, we want to streamline our processes, it also has to be secure. It has to make sure that we can ensure confidentiality. And it, obviously has to be something that the employees that will be useful, right? Now, because HR professionals need to be able to identify the specific functions of the information system and evaluate whether it will meet the organization's needs, we also should be familiar with the information system's makeup. There are four components to an information system. You have the presentation tier. This is the layer where the end user interacts with the application. So the presentation tier is that top level. It runs on the desktop, or it is what runs on your PC, or whatever device you're using. And it is what displays the information like your shopping carts, or your queries, or your responses, right? And then we have the logic tier. The logic tier controls the functionality. So this is the tier that might have like a separate module running on a PC, or running on some kind of workstation. And you might have management software or a performance management system, right, running on this logic tier. This is the tier that manages the communication with the hardware. So the logic tier moves information between the software and the data tier. The data tier controls the servers. This is where the information is stored, right? And this is where it houses the information that's necessary to answer queries, right? So, and this is where you can have on-site, or you can have it can be housed in the cloud. This is where that determination is made. And then, not pictured here because I could not find a slide that would picture it, but there is also the communications tier. And that is the level that connects to the internal and the external systems. And ERP, which we've talked about earlier, but it is the enterprise resource planning system, right? So it gives each part of the organization access to the same stored information. The ERP is divided into different areas, and the information from each business area is housed for access for everybody inside of the organization, right? So your HRIS system is information related to HR. So you may have information about payroll, or you may have information about benefits, right? Production may have production targets, or it could have vendor information, right? Or whatever those things are that are affecting production. ERP sometimes can be more limited, right? You can't customize them like the way that may be necessary for your organization, right? And that can be a problem in some organizations. Lots of organizations rely on best of breed systems to get that kind of customization that they want, rather than just having an ERP, which is kind of standardized, right? Another issue with finding the right technology for an organization is scalability. So while we are now, the use of big data expands automation and self-service, it also comes with an increase of processing time. And because of that, a lot of organizations have started to rely on cloud computing. And you probably see that like kind of in your day-to-day. Technology also helps HR professionals to save time by reducing the amount of transactional work that we have to do, especially employee self-service, because that lets the employees do a lot of things for themselves. They can access like their benefits or training modules, payroll, like if they want to just, change like the tax information or update an address or something like that. they don't need our assistance to do that anymore, right? And so we can do things that add more value to the organization. So I think we all like that. And then your manager self-service, it allows the managers and supervisors to support themselves better, right? So they can have more access to their employee information, and they can do more initiation of those employee related activities, right? So if they, need to do a leave request, or if somebody needs to be terminated, right? Our managers can do that, which again is, the actual act of doing it is administrative, right? The actual act of separating is administrative. Now, of course, before then, HR needs to be involved. That's an operational role. So we do need to be involved in like the counseling, or, whatever is necessary beforehand. But the act of actually cutting the cord and making the separation can be done in a system that the managers can use, which is good. Another decision to be made is what the HRIS is intended to do. Right. So based on that assessment, the choice of an integrated system or a best of breed is determined. And a best of breed is a system that supports each part of the function. Right. So, for example, you may have a separate applicant tracking system for recruitment. You may have a separate learning management system for training, maybe a self-service for benefits, right? An integrated system encompasses all of those different things into one system, right? The best of breed allows each function to choose the system that is best for their specific needs. But the integrated system has the advantage of consistency. That means you'll just have one vendor. You will have a system that each part of the function is familiar with. They can cross-reference information that way. They are going to have access to the same data. But obviously there are disadvantages as well, because that means that everybody has to take what they can get. You don't have that best of breed system, so you won't be able to customize it, and you won't get the best system. But there's just some give and take. You have to just decide. You have to decide what is best for your organization. When you are making decision in a best of breed or an integrated system, another consideration is how to deliver the technology. So it can be on premise. That is when the organization purchases the hardware and the software, and the installation and management of that is handled by the internal IT team. It could also be hosted. Right. So that's when the applications in the software are off-site, and it is handled by an external IT team. A lot of companies are going with software as a service. Right. There have been, I don't know why, but there have been an increase of these software as a service companies. This is when a subscription to the software is offered, and it is accessed through the cloud. So that software as a service company, they develop the software for subscription, right? And they deliver that subscription to lots of different people who pay for it, like on a monthly basis or yearly basis, or however they do it, right? And the software as a service company also runs the hardware. And we're going to wrap up technology with system security, because we know how important that is, and I do not want to leave that out. This is going to be something that you're going to see, which it was indicated to us that there would be an increase of questions around security of technology, right? So security of technology is something that you need to pay attention to in this window. Data and system security are extremely important. And breach of security can be financially damaging, and it can have real life implications for the people who are affected. Like when your personal information is gained by nefarious characters, that is a real life consequence for you. And it goes beyond just a company's branding. Like at that point, you don't really care about a company's branding, right? So, and then also for the business itself, if your proprietary information is accessed, you lose your competitive advantage, right? The people know secrets about you that can be costly to you, and it also damages your brand because now the public knows that they can't trust you. They don't know if their information has been accessed, right? So system security is important. To maintain that security, we use firewalls, we use encryption, hacking prevention measures. And some of the hacking prevention measures that we use is one of them is social engineering, phishing, link click scams, and fake security alerts, right? Help us to try to combat those things. Let's see any questions. So let me keep right on going here. Okay, guys, can you believe it? We have new workplace. We are winding down now. So, very good. What we have is managing a global workforce. We have risk management, and we have corporate social responsibility. So we are on the home stretch now, people. All right, let's talk about managing a global workforce. We have to start with globalization, right? Because globalization is what makes it necessary to manage a global workforce. And globalization is the process of moving people and goods between borders. It happens when there are not a lot of barriers that are slowing down the flow of things between the nations. And that makes it more cost efficient for everybody. It makes it easier for companies to produce their products. It makes it more competitive for the consumer, right? Because now we have lots of people to choose from, which makes the companies have to keep, good prices, right? Because there's somebody else who is willing to snatch all of your customers if you want to have high prices. So globalization is it's just good for the consumer market, right? It just helps in a variety of ways. Understanding the way that the world is interconnected captures how forces of globalization have connected our world, right? So there are 3 principles of global force interconnectedness. The first one is the distinction between large-scale forces and trendy phenomena. So a large-scale event is something that impacts large areas of the globe, and it impacts it for a long period of time. A trendy phenomena is something that affects a smaller area, and it isn't long lasting, right? Like a hurricane or a volcano eruption, right? The second principle is the pest factors. So the pest factors are those, political, economic, social, technological, all of those factors. So, because if you consider globalization as a removal of global barriers, you can imagine why the pest factors are important in that consideration. If there are political forces that are preventing globalization, right, it is more difficult for organizations to move products between nations, which, obviously is going to cause less competition, which means companies can set higher prices. If there is problem with economics, like monies, companies can't produce more things, right? Then same thing happens. Social, technological, all of those things like have the same impact. So we have to think about that. If there is political unrest, it might hinder travel. Economic things, again, it could hinder production maybe, right? And that also describes how global forces are felt locally, because eventually it trickles down. Another factor shaping globalization is the use of technology, right? So hyperconnectivity is probably the most definitive sign of globalization. Now more than any time in the past, people are able to remain constantly connected with, I mean, it's relatively easy. I have people here now from what is it, two different, I think it's 7 different countries. There are people here from, at least 20 different states, right? If we all had to meet in one place to do this, there would be significantly less people in this class. And we wouldn't be able to connect, and we wouldn't know each other, right? And we wouldn't realize the benefits, right, of connecting together. So hyperconnectivity is a sign, right, of globalization. Connecting with other countries and other markets. Now we can just, anytime we want to, we can connect with somebody. But hyperconnectivity is the use of multiple ways of staying connected, right? So it is the idea that the number of ways that people can connect outweighs the number of people who need to connect. Because now, like, if if we weren't connecting on the Kajabi platform, we could use Zoom, we could use Teams, we could do, I'll do a group FaceTime, we can do a phone call, we can do, lots of different ways for us to connect, right? So the number of ways that we can connect outweighs our connection, because all we need is one way of connecting, right? And we found the way that we can connect. But there are so many different ways that we can do it, right? And that is what hyperconnectivity is. It is more ways than we need to be connected. Push and pull factors are events that drive globalization because these cause migration, right? So push factors are unfavorable conditions that push organizations to go elsewhere. And pull factors are advantages that pull organizations towards something better, right? So think of the pull factor like a magnet, and a magnet attracts, or it pulls things to it. And of course, we know people aren't attracted to problems, right? They're attracted to solutions. So if something is pulling us, then it must be something positive. If something is pushing us, it must be something negative, right? That we are trying to get away from. That's normally how I remember the push and pull factors. Push and pull factors have traditionally been something that I don't know why students found it confusing, right? So I did want to throw in a few one-liners here so we could talk about those push and pull factors really quickly, so I can evaluate whether or not I need to spend a little bit more time. So let's look at the first one here, and you guys tell me if it is a push or a pull factor. All right, number one says increased cost of production. Push or pull? Everybody chose push for this one. Push is the correct answer. Let's look at the next one. A corrupt local government. Push or pull? All right, push. Very good. Next, less risk of natural hazards. Push or pull? Y'all are on a roll. All right, next, high crime rates. Okay, this one is a push. Very good. I don't know if I said less risk of natural hazards. It is a pull factor, just in case somebody's listening. I want to make sure. So this one is a pull factor. High crime rates is a push factor. All right, let's go to the next one. Strong education systems. Okay, that is a pull factor. And an affluent economy. This is also a pull factor. All right, y'all are all in. Very good. Very good. We're all in. Let's keep right on going here. The EPRG model. The EPRG model describes 4 different ways that organizations operate globally. Right? So the organization has to decide which management approach is going to make the business most successful. The approaches are how the EPRG model it got its name, right? Because it is the first letter of each approach. The first approach is an ethnocentric approach. Take a sip of water. In an ethnocentric approach, the policies and the procedures are made at the headquarters, right? And your subsidiaries then have to default to the policies that are made at the headquarters. And the subsidiaries are the countries that are outlying. These are the outlying branches or the countries that the business is moving into. In the polycentric approach, the policies and the procedures are decided by the subsidiaries, right? So the headquarters believes that the most effective business approach is to allow the host countries to decide on the business practices that are going to be most successful in that country. The regiocentric approach groups the subsidiaries by region, right? So you may have like maybe South American region or Central American region or the North American region, right? And the regions coordinate the policies and the practices. The geocentric approach is an allied perspective. So the headquarters and the subsidiaries, they get together, they work together, they make decisions that are best for the organization as a whole. I remember these because ethnocentric is ethnic, right? Which means home. Polycentric means more than one. So more than one is subsidiaries, because we normally have more than one subsidiary. So the subsidiaries make the decision. Regiocentric is obviously by region. And then geocentric is what's left. Okay. Each one of these approaches also correspond to a recruiting strategy. So the ethnocentric recruiting strategy recruits the top level employees from the home country. The polycentric recruiting strategy fills the key positions with people from the host country, right? Or the country where the subsidiaries are located. The regio-centric structure or the recruiting strategy is to staff from the same region. And then you have the geocentric approach, and that is to recruit the best employees regardless of where they come from. So it doesn't matter where they come from. Let's just get them. Let's see. Imani says polycentric and geocentric always confuse you. Okay, so the polycentric approach is to allow multiple subsidiaries, because poly means multiple. So it is to allow multiple subsidiaries to make the decisions. Geocentric approach, and when in a polycentric approach, we defer to the subsidiaries. That means the home country doesn't have any input or any say so in it, right? So the subsidiaries make the decisions. Now, in a geocentric approach, the subsidiaries and the home country equally make the decisions. It doesn't matter whoever has the best idea that is going to make the company most successful. That is who makes the decisions. So there is no default. In ethnocentric, there is a default. We default to the home country. Polycentric, we default to the subsidiary. Regiocentric, we default to the region. In geocentric, there is no default, right? We do whatever is best, right? Whatever is going to make the organization most successful. Okay. Does that clear it up for you, Imani? Because I can go on. I probably have a million. Okay. Let's keep things going here. This is the Bartlett-Goldschall matrix. And this is the 4 different approaches to business when the business is operating in several countries, right? So it highlights 2 factors: local responsiveness and also the pressure to integrate. So local responsiveness is the pressure to respond to the local market conditions, right? What do the people want in the place that we are operating in? So that means that they have to consider the needs of the local population. Also, domestic or local competition is a consideration, right? Because we don't want the locals to be the local competition to be offering something that is for the people, and we're trying to, do something. We're trying to be integrative, right, and missing the mark, right? So that is the pressure there. And then we also have to consider like forces that push us to integrate our activities on a global basis, right? So things like the cost of marketing and trying to differentiate our service in the global market, reaching economies of scale, right? That's a big consideration. And that happens when production becomes efficient enough that larger quantities can be made for less money. So we have to make a decision about local responsiveness or global integration. What is going to be best for the organization? And there are some combinations here, right? So let's look at the global approach first. The global approach has a low consideration of the local market and a high consideration for global integration, right? So the goal here is to maximize efficiency and to reduce costs. They offer the same product worldwide, and the branches are highly dependent on the headquarters. Now, the transnational approach aims to respond locally, but also get the benefits of integration. The international approach has a low consideration for both integration and local responsiveness. So it relies on the idea that the most important activities are going to be taken care of at the headquarters anyway. So there's really no need for global integration or local adaptation. And then finally is the multi-domestic approach. And the aim here is to meet the needs of the local market. The products are going to be, tailored to fit the local market. And then they have a low pressure for integration, right? So they are trying to serve the market in which they are operating in. All right. Okay, so we just talked about the GILR matrix, and that is what helps us to understand the business approaches that we use when we're operating globally. Upstream and downstream is a way of determining where decisions are made, right? So upstream decisions are made at headquarters. The decisions are usually strategic and they involve process standardization. Downstream means the decisions are made locally, and these usually involve executions of the decisions that are made upstream, right? I don't think there's a lot more that we need to say about that, so we're going to go on. Global identity and process alignment are also interpreted from a cultural perspective, right? So identity alignment is the adjustments that a company will make to their products or will make to their service based on where they're operating, right? So let's say that a textile company sells wool, but they're operating in a place that sees or believes that sheep are sacred animals, that they shouldn't be, shaved for wool, right? So if they're a textile company, wool may not be something that they can offer in one of their subsidiaries, right? It may, if they're operating in a place where sheep are seen as sacred, then they can't sell wool there because nobody will buy it, right? And also they probably would, be very upset about it and probably wouldn't want to buy anything for them. So they would have to align their identity with where they are operating in. So instead of wool, maybe they would do like silk or cotton or something like that. Process alignment is the meshing of our internal processes across all of the locations. So you have to consider your processes for recruiting and for payroll, right? Can those things transfer locally? In some countries, it's okay to list a job opening for a man or for a woman, right? So if you operate globally, you have to consider the implication of that and decide whether or not you want to align locally or whether you want to align the processes to be standardized, right? So that is something that you have to have careful consideration of. All right, so that takes us to the management of global assignments. So global assignments are projects that employees take on in countries outside of their own. Some countries have a skills shortage, or maybe they require, a certain level of expertise, right? So you bring in a person with that expertise. There are two approaches to managing global assignments. There is the strategic approach, and then there is the tactical approach. So the strategic approach is long term. So it is trying to understand the global perspectives and then pass that on to the management to help them to develop the competitive assignment strategies in that place that we're operating in. The tactical approach is more of a quick fix, right? It is like, we didn't see this happening. We are reacting to maybe a manager who decided they didn't want to do global assignments anymore. And so now we just have to figure out, we have to get somebody there, right? So that's our tactical approach. Globalists are employees who spend their entire career on assignments, right? They go to different locations. Local hires are employees who are hired from the host country or the subsidiary, right, in which we're operating. Short-term assignees are workers who are on assignment. Usually it's a few weeks to a year, longer than a business trip, but shorter than an international stay. International assignees are traditionally what we think of as expats. And these workers live and work outside of their country of residence, but they are going to return to their, country of residence after their time expires, right? Commuters are workers who move across borders, countries' borders to go to work, right? So like somebody who lives in US but works in Mexico, or lives in US but works in Canada, right? And then just-in-time expats are contract expats who are hired for one project, or maybe they just take on one job, or they take on just, one assignment. So that brings us to the managing of a global assignment. So there are 5 steps in managing a global assignment. First one is assignment and selection. We're just getting started. So you are just developing your selection criteria. You are choosing the best selection methods, and then you make a recommendation about, the assignment. Then you have the management and assignee decision. This is where you do like your analysis. Maybe you do a cost benefit analysis, right? You prepare the assignment plan. And in step 1, you make the recommendation about the assignment, right? Like who you think will best fit the assignment. Well, in step 2, the candidate who you have nominated or how you've identified, they have to either accept or reject that assignment. You can't just make them go. So, right? So they have to accept or reject. So that's what we do in step 2. Then in step 3, it is pre-departure. So the person, if they accept, they have to get the documents that they need. They have to make sure nothing is going to be expired that they may need while they're there. Make sure that their passports, they have them. You do your security briefings here. You talk about personal security, but also how they secure companies' secrets, like how do they secure their laptop, or whatever it is they're going to be traveling with. Sometimes you need to have counseling because people really don't know what to expect on assignment. I've been on a global assignment before, and I thought it was going to be all fun and games, and I didn't have counseling. Maybe I should have, because about month 2, I was like, get me out of here. Right. So that's what happens in pre-departure. Okay, when you are on assignment, there are 4 stages. There is the honeymoon stage, right? Everything is new, everything is exciting. It kind of feels like a vacation for a little while there. Then you move into culture shock. Okay, you understand that, listen, this is going to be challenging. I don't speak the language. I don't know all the cultural norms. I don't know anybody. There is no, after work life. After work life, it's going back home because you don't know anybody. You don't know where you're going. Next, you start to make adjustments, right? So you understand the host country norms. You start figuring out how you can get things done, right, in the country. You start to make a few friends. You have a few work friends. You can hang out a little bit, right? So we're starting to adjust. And then finally is mastery. That's when you have full participation, right? And you are comfortable in the host country. It becomes a second home to you. Now, I never made it to mastery. I did make it to adjustments, but mastery eluded me. I was ready to come home. And then in number 5 is assignment completion. Right? So there are 2 things that can happen on assignment completion. The person can either be repatriated, right? So they are reintegrated to the home country and they adjust to a new job, or they can be redeployed, right? And they can go to a new location. So both things are possible. Okay. When you know it, that brings us to risk management. And we will get through it and go on to CSR. All right. I feel like we're going to be right on time, just a few minutes late. Risk is the possibility of an unfavorable circumstance happening that might threaten the business objective. And it can happen in any area of the business. It can happen in finance, training, safety, anywhere, right? Every part of the organization is exposed to some kind of risk. Now, the way that we manage those risks predicts the outcome of the organization. How well we will be able to continue to run, right? The risk management process is the process of helping us to mitigate those risks, right? So the risk management process has 4 steps. The first step in the risk management process is to observe the context of the risk, right? Establishing the context of the risk is kind of like the prologue of a book, right? You're looking at who are the people involved. What are those people's attitude toward risk? Are they risk averse or are they more risk takers, right? And making sure that aligns with the organization's stance on risk, because you don't want to put somebody in charge of risk that are risk takers, but your organization is risk averse. So you don't want your CEO to be a risk taker if the organization traditionally doesn't like to take on risk. So you want to make sure that you align those things. Next is analyzing the risk, right? So that means identifying like the potential risk and the impact to the company that those risks may have. Then is risk mitigation. So that involves the development of a risk response plan to each of those potential risks that we identify. And then finally is the evaluation, right? That is to review and to revise your risk mitigation tactics, as well as just monitoring for new risk or for changes in those identified risks. Knowledge of is really important when we are trying to manage it, right? So the level at which risk is apparent is categorized in three ways. You have your known knowns. These are things that we know about and we can respond to pretty easily. Then we have known unknowns. So these are things that we know, but we don't know everything about it, right? We can prepare, but we can't adequately, fully respond. And then we have the unknown unknown. So these are the ones that just come out the blue, right? And we have nothing in place because we never imagined this thing could happen. One of the most recent ones is probably like COVID. Like it was an unknown. It wasn't on anybody's radar. We never could imagine like what it would have done. The shutdown, like all the things that came along with it. We didn't have that. Most companies had to figure that out on the fly. They didn't have that in their foresight, right? So it was an unknown. Those kinds of things happen all the time in companies. Oops, I want to talk a little bit more. I'm going to talk about all of these. Kaplan and Mike identify three categories of risk, right? So the categories help us to understand degree of risk so that a decision can be made on how to respond to that risk, right? Or how it can be managed. Preventable risks originate from inside the organization, and generally they can be managed pretty effectively, right? Because they come from inside the organization. So we have some control over these. So these are things like employee theft or safety violations, right? Now, your strategic risks are risks that an organization take on as a cost of doing business. The potential benefits outweigh the risks, so the organization accepts that. External risks come from outside the organization. So these are things like crime or weather, right? Or an economy crash, right? So some things we just don't have control over. Another risk category approach separates risk in four ways. So there is strategic, operational, financial, and then hazard. Strategic risks are risks that affect the organization's strategic objectives, and that threatens the vision of the organization, not division, but the vision of the organization. Operational risks are risks to the day-to-day activities, and that is what creates value for the organization. So obviously we have to respond. Financial risk, they affect the financial standing. And hazard risks are things that can hurt people, right? So these are the things that can damage property or, kill somebody, right? So we have to make sure that we respond to those. And these same risks exist inside of HR as well, right? So we have these same risk categories. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about observing the risk as a part of, because I'm going to try to see if I can break down the risk management process by each step. So the first step is observing the context, right? So we can take a look at each step in that risk management process, and we can understand how mitigation happens, right? So remember I told you that the context of the risk is kind of like a book prologue. It introduces you to the potential risk. You know how the book prologue gives you information like the sources and the players, who are going to be influenced. the circumstances that brought the book about, right? When you're observing the risk, a lot of that same information is identified. One of the things that are determined in the observation is the risk position and the risk appetite, right? So your risk appetite is how much risk the team is willing to accept in their decisions or in the actions that they take, right? So for example, maybe an HR department is open to hiring candidates with maybe less experience, but they have high potential because they think it can help the company grow in the long run, right? So their risk appetite is moderate. They are okay with taking on some risk in hiring because they want to achieve a better outcome. So that is their appetite. Now, the risk position is the current level of risk that the team has taken on based on their hiring actions, right? So after they hire those candidates who have less experience, now the company has a team that has a higher percentage of junior employees who may require more training, right? So their risk position is high because they currently have more junior staff than they initially anticipated, right? So that is the position that we're in right now. So risk appetite is about what the team is okay with, right? Like taking that chance on taking the chance on hiring those people who don't have experience. And the risk position is what HR is actually facing in this circumstance, right? So right now we are facing the fact that we have a lot of new hires who need training, right? So that's where we currently are. That is our position. Okay, so that takes us to risk analysis. Once we've identified the context of the risk, the next step is to analyze each risk. And that helps us to determine how the risk is going to be approached. When you're analyzing risk, you're gathering information about the impact of the risk occurrence. So that means you need to determine the likelihood of the occurrence, the speed at which it will happen, and if the organization has what it needs to respond to that. This is known as the risk level, right? So the probability of occurrence times the severity of the impact. That risk level is determined using risk analysis tools. One you see on screen here, the risk scorecard. Also, we're going to talk about another one, which is the risk matrix. So the risk scorecard outlines all of the risk factors that we identified as a part of our analysis, right? Like the likelihood of occurrence, the speed at which it would happen, the existing response, the severity, right? And we assess that against an existing risk, right? We can use this scorecard here. All right, so another risk analysis tool is the risk matrix, right? So the risk matrix is basically an illustration of the risk level. So it assigns risk occurrence as either low to high based on where it falls on the matrix. So if you look at this matrix that I have on screen here, you'll see that a risk that has a low likelihood of occurrence and a low impact is low risk. High likelihood but low impact is medium risk, right? So basically where they intersect, that determines the risk level, right? So you see like low likelihood and low impact intersect here. So that means the risk level is low. Now, after the risk have been analyzed, the PAPA model is used to rank the risk and give us a direction for responding to those risks. So just like the risk matrix, the place of intersection determines the response. So if a risk has a high likelihood of occurrence, but the speed in which it will happen is low, then the organization just needs to adapt to that. If it has a high likelihood of occurrence and the speed at which it would happen is fast, then that requires the organization to take some action, right? So they have to act right away. There are also risk management strategies, right? So the risk management strategy is how we respond to risk. So you can see here, there is the sharing of risk. So that means sharing in either the loss of the gain. That's what we do. That's why we pay insurance, right? Because we want somebody else to share. If we, have an accident in our car, then we don't want to be fully responsible for it. We want the insurance company to help us, right? Avoidance, obviously, is to try to avoid the risk altogether. Reduction is to put some barriers in place to reduce the risk. And also acceptance. So sometimes the possibility of the win outweighs the possibility of loss. So we step in and we accept that risk. That's what we do in business every day, because there's a possibility of the business, failing, or it's a possibility of it losing, but we go ahead and we step in because there is also the possibility of us being quite successful and quite profitable, right? So we take that risk in order to be in business. Okay, and it looks like we're only going to be like 5 minutes late, right? Because CSR is a short one. So let's look at CSR. CSR is the idea that a company should embed in its business practice a way of environmental preservation while still generating profit for its stakeholders. So the company actually has a responsibility to the community that it is operating in to return a portion of what it is extracting from that community. CSR is different depending on the industry. Like a restaurant is going to have something different to offer than maybe a manufacturer, right? But whatever the initiative, the goal is to reduce the impact on that business's, on the community, because of that business's operations, right? So that's what's most important. In more recent years, companies have begun to recognize CSR as more than just a nice to have. It's no longer like an afterthought. It is now a part of the organization's strategy. And so this evolution of CSR has been shaped by pestle factors, mostly environmental concerns is what is really driving CSR from what I can see. And then some of social factors as well. Like there's a public outcry to like take care of the earth that we're living in so that we can leave something for children. And then just for businesses to be responsible with resources, not just like natural resources, but like money, just a call for responsibility. Organizations have one of 3 approaches to CSR. So the first one is compliance, which means that the organization is doing what's necessary to avoid negative branding and to remain in business and to just not be punished, right? The second one is integration. And integration means that the organization has made a conscious effort to align their business activities and to align their products to be responsible. And then finally is transformation. So that means the organization has undergone a revamp. They are actively looking for processes and branding opportunities and products that reflect a commitment to CSR, right? So for example, maybe a large construction company that cuts down lots of trees. They might commit as a part of their business practice. They might commit to planting 2 trees for every 1 tree that they cut down, right? So now they have transformed the way that they do business. Like they would, as a part of their standard operating procedure, it is to plant 2 trees when 1 is cut down. Now, sustainability takes CSR a step further. Not only should the businesses seek to put back in what they have taken out, they also have to consider long-term ways to meet the present without diminishing the resources for the future. So the gist is that they have to make sure that they are acting responsibly, but they also have to be generating money for their current stakeholders, right? So they have a responsibility to do both things. That's what happens. That could be like that construction example, right? That's an effort in sustainability because they have to cut down the trees because they are in business to make money. People are depending upon them. People have invested in them. Stakeholders are expecting, jobs or money or whatever it is they're expecting. So they have the responsibility to generate profit, but they also have to think about the future, right? So those things intersect, and that's what creates sustainability. There are three facets of sustainability. So it is environmental, social, and financial. These are what we call the triple bottom line. So that means businesses should operate to generate profit for their stakeholders, but also take care for the planet and act fairly toward the people. And when these things meet, right, this is called the sustainability sweet spot, right here in the middle, where these three things overlap. That's what we are trying to do. When you're considering the planet or environmental factors, you're thinking of things like pollution or climate change, or water preservation, right? How can companies assist in preserving those things while still making money, right? So like using renewable energy or reducing pollution emission, right? So those kind of different things. When we're thinking of people or the social aspect, companies need to act fairly toward their employees, but they also have to act fairly toward the rest of the population. So you can't be emitting things that are going to make me sick, right? You have to be fair. And then financially, or profit, is about being financially responsible, right? So knowing that communities depend on large businesses for their economic stability, they have to be responsible in their financial actions. They can't take risks that they can't afford. Like the bank can't take risks that are going to cause them to not be, I can't withdraw money that I put into bank, right? That's not financially responsible, right? And then they also have to take steps to be prepared for, not yet, sorry. They have to take steps to be prepared for any kind of economic downfall. So that's really what happened, like when, in 2008, when we got into the recession, it was that banks were not being responsible, right? They weren't they weren't denying people who had a greater risk of not being able to pay those loans, and so it caused that collapse, right? And so that's why we have more protections in place right now. Okay, yay! Guess what? You made it. Can you believe it? You did it. Is there anybody here who stayed the whole time? Oh my gosh, y'all are rock stars. I can't believe it. Okay, you're good. Very good. Okay, so hopefully, yeah, you guys are trying to pass. It did not feel that long. You are right. It did not feel like 7.5 hours has passed, right? But it definitely has. It has passed. Okay, very good. So hopefully this was helpful to everybody. I hope this was good information. Hopefully, I was able to clear things up for you, to give you some to understand where you need to focus. You will receive the recording. There was a lot of strange things that happened today. It kept saying that the recording was paused. So I'm hoping that doesn't become a problem. How long is the SJI workshop? Not this long. The SJI workshop is only 2 hours long. Yay! So you won't have to block off a whole day. So very good. So the SJI workshop is on the 27th. Now, if you plan to sign up for the SJI workshop, go sign up for it today, because I looked last night and there were only 18 spots left. And I'm hoping I don't have to do a second one. But if I do, I will. But yes, so go grab your spot today for the SJI workshop. You can just go to, yes, there is a recording. If you go to HR Exam Prep with Angela, click on live sessions and you will see it there. The recordings are going to be available to you until July 15th, right, which is the end of the testing window. How do we get the test prep questions? I'm not sure exactly. Be more specific about that, Sherry. The SJI workshop, SHAR, is one. And then, of course, tips, tricks, and techniques. Okay, I don't see any more questions at the end of class. You said there were 60 practice questions with this section. Yeah, there are 65 practice questions. It's under the resource tab as well with the notes. No, the cram will not be offered again. I can only do one of these per testing season. My voice is going to be, I'm going to have to recover tonight. Okay. I do still have a voice. All right. See you next week. You are welcome. You're so welcome. Yeah, Barbara, if you sign up for both, there is a discount. Oh, you're very welcome. You're welcome, Kathy. You guys are welcome. Everybody's welcome. Thank you guys for trusting me. Y'all just don't know how much I appreciate the trust you put into me. I take it super serious. Yep. Oh, I'm so glad, Joy. That's great to know. Great to hear. If you sign up for all 3 courses at the same time, then you do get a discount. If somebody has not received the discount, reach out to me by email. I'll try to figure out what I can do. Pretty sure I can do something. All right. I will see everybody on the 27th. I don't see any more questions. So I will see you guys. Oh, or some of you I can see. Some of you I will see on this Saturday, because we still have class this Saturday. Oh, Chris, what? Say what again? I don't know. I missed something. Okay, about SHRM, like specifically. I don't remember what I said. I'm sorry. See, Chris, maybe you have to jog my memory. Okay. Tips, tricks, and techniques also on the website. So you go to HR Exam Prep with Angela, navigate to live session, and it should be under there. If it isn't, it may not be actually. I think I need to add it actually. So I will, what I will do is, if you are not going to join on the 27th, because tips, tricks, and techniques is on the 3rd. So if you're not going to join on the 27th, then email me. If you are going to join on the 27th, I'll give it to you at that class. I don't have the link prepared for that class. Oh, Amanda B is offering for a study group. So I think everybody should take advantage of that. Amanda's email address is in the chat. It'd be great if everybody were to get together to form a study group, or as many of you as possible. SJI workshop is April 27th. Okay. All right. I don't see any more questions. So with that, is there a copy to get the receipt online? No, I will need to send you the receipt. And I know a couple of you have asked for the receipt. It's just taking me a little minute to get through all of the emails, but I will get to it in the next couple of days for sure. Okay. All right. Well, if that is it, I will see some of you on Saturday. I will see some of you in a couple of weeks on the 27th. All right. Talk to y'all later. Bye.